Daniel Whiteson, is the author of a book that's just out, and you too can find out whether aliens speak physics. That's right. Daniel Whiteson hosts a podcast with Kelly Weinersmith. And additionally, what's the name of that podcast?
Daniel and Kelly's Extraordinary Universe.
Extraordinary Universe.
Because the universe is extraordinary.
And it's your universe because you're talking about it in the podcast. It's fantastic. You've also been part of creating a PBS show for kids that inspires curiosity. Eleanor is the name of that one. Are you still working on that?
Yeah, Eleanor Wonders Why is a show on PBS. It's for 3 to 5 year olds about life science and curiosity. And the goal of the show is to teach kids to learn to answer questions by them on their own by using basic practices of science, and to show adults that it's okay when kids ask you a question to say, I don't know, let's figure it out. You don't have to know all the answers to talk about science with your kids. And so that show is just finishing its production of its 2nd season, which is a lot of fun. And so new episodes are coming on PBS right now. Because of the current climate, we don't know if PBS will still be a thing. Corporation for Public Broadcasting, sadly, is no longer. We were also supported kindly by Department of Education, our TL grant, which is no longer. And so things are looking difficult, but we'll see about a 3rd season.
My fingers are crossed for you and for all of the parents who are out there who would love some additional help answering questions with their kids. I think it'd be great. Blair's going to be looking forward to that fairly soon. That's right. So your book, Do Aliens Speak Physics? Do they? Give us the short and dirty.
The book asks whether or not we can, when aliens arrive, make a mental connection with them using physics. Because I was always told, and this is one reason I got into physics, was that physics was sort of special among human sciences in that it's bigger than Earth. Like, yeah, it's cool to study pandas and understand life and everything here on Earth. It's fantastic and important, but we expect that the things we learn might just be limited and relevant to stuff here on Earth. But physics is supposed to be about the whole universe, and like gravity is here as gravity is there, and we see gravity working the same way in distant galaxies, etc. So the idea is that, physics asks questions that are bigger than humanity. And so it might be that not only humanity is asking those questions. And I've long fantasized about the scenario where aliens show up and we can make a connection using physics, and then they can give us some answers, because we have big questions about the nature of the universe that are not answered. Like, where did it come from? What is it made out of? What's inside black holes? What is space anyway? All these things we don't understand. It would be wonderful if aliens, who might have been doing science for millions of years, could just tell us, could just leap us forward in our own scientific future. So that was my fantasy. And, folks like Carl Sagan tell you that we're fairly confident that aliens will do physics the way we do, because the same laws of physics apply everywhere. But the book asks whether that would really happen.
Yeah. The same laws of physics apply everywhere. But if you are coming from a different referential frame, a different perceptual frame. Blair's a zoologist, so if we could imagine a planet of squirrels, how would they?
Why would you do that?
Blair, do you have PSSD, post-squirrel stress syndrome? Or whatever disorder? And that's a fun joke, but you're exactly right. Just because the laws of physics, or we think that our laws of physics apply everywhere, doesn't mean that the people in those other places would describe them the same way. So really the book is about the philosophical question of, is physics the map or is it the territory? We're looking at the universe through a human lens. Can we disentangle how much of it is the universe and how much of it is this single human lens we all have in common. And until the aliens arrive, we won't be able to tell how much our humanity has distorted the physics that we've interpreted, and how much of our humanity is in the physics that we've interpreted, and how alien physics might be shockingly alien. And so the book goes through a bunch of arguments for how physics could be essentially invented or discovered.
You mentioned earlier, we were talking about the exoplanets, and you were talking about the rogue planets that might cross in front of a star, and so you've got this
Mhm.
eclipse of an eclipse of a, and at one point in time, we thought that the Earth was the center of the universe, right? The
Yeah.
Earth, everything centered around the Earth, because of course we saw the sky move around the Earth at night, and so our way
Mhm.
of looking at it.
Mhm.
And now we have these new eyes on the sky to be able to um, show us new things. What kind of logical pathway did you go down to try and imagine, say, if you were on another planet, if you were an alien,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
how do you get into that mindset to like think of it from I'm not a human anymore. I'm not on planet Earth. I'm not a human.
Mhm, mhm. Well, you got started exactly the right way. You have to question, you have to identify and then question the assumptions that you're making and wonder, is this really the only way we could have done it? And we have a terrible history of this, right? We make these assumptions that seem reasonable. Well, we look like we're the center of the cosmos, so obviously the Earth is at the center. And we also tend to fall for the flattering assumptions, like, ooh, the Earth is at the center, therefore we're important, right? So it's easy to therefore also say things like, well, we figured out physics and it seems to work, so therefore aliens will. And that puts us at the intellectual center, right? It says that human physics is like the physics, that everyone out there will also be doing the same stuff and working on string theory and all sorts of stuff. And that's very tempting to believe. And like my personal fantasy of an intergalactic science conference is very fun to think about. But because it's so tempting, I think it needs extra skepticism. So what I tried to do is look at all those assumptions and ask, like, well, how do we know? Are we really sure? And you can start from the very basics, like, how do we know that aliens do science at all? That aliens wonder why about the universe, that they have the same curiosity. Blair was earlier wondering, like, I wonder if this, I wonder if that, I wonder if you did this study, what would the answer be? That's interesting. That's wonderful. And that's a very human thing, to be so curious and to want to know about the universe. But that's also emotional, right? It's part of being human, and it's different from person to person. One person is super interested in physics, another person interested in poop, another person interested in geology, somebody else interested in, languages. We have an amazing diversity of science on Earth because of the personal reactions people have to these questions. And so to say that aliens will automatically be curious like we are, and will automatically develop the same sort of methods to build these mental models about the universe, that's a big leap. That's a big assumption that we have that in common with them.
The idea of like mental models. So like as a cognitive scientist from, I studied bird brains, and so it was this comparative brain and behavior work trying to come up, okay, apes, we have a theory
Mhm.
of mind, right? They can like look at another animal and go, oh, this squirrel is going to dig in the soil and hide its nuts. Um,
Love your ape voice. Yeah.
Thank you. This is how the apes are talking. Yes. But forever, and Blair, like in the animal corner we're constantly like well, duh, like
Mhm.
suddenly a scientist did a study that shows an animal is smarter than anyone
Right.
thought,
Yeah.
or, oh, an animal is clearly intelligent, like in this particular way. And so I think it's a really interesting the way that your book goes forward with these scenarios and delving into this perspective of, okay, how do we put on the skeptical hat, but also
Mhm.
how do we really try and consider the cognitive kind of philosophical aspects of what aliens would be interested in? I've read plenty of sci-fi books, and some of them you have spacefaring aliens who were not curious, but they leapfrogged into the stories. It's not
Mhm.
sci-fi, not real. Yeah, whatever. But um, I don't know. Do you think that curiosity is necessary?
It's a fascinating question. I don't know if curiosity is necessary because the only thing we can do is like look at our one example here on Earth and try to extrapolate from that. And even here on Earth,
Mhm.
we have been developing technology and getting better at stuff long before we had any idea how it all worked, before our curiosity helped us. Think about like bread and cheese. These things are, you have to be a master of the microbes to make these things work. And we had no idea. We didn't even know germs existed until fairly recently. So we develop these technologies through trial and error without knowing, just knowing like, here's how you do it. The same way, like I will go into the kitchen and make a souffle and like, I don't understand the food chemistry. I don't really want to understand the food chemistry. I just want to eat the souffle. The same way, like a sword maker knows how to make a sword without understanding like the condensed matter physics of the
Mm.
nanostructures that make that thing super sharp instead of super dull. They know
Mhm.
how to do it. They don't know why. They don't understand it. So we were technological
My cell
before.
phone.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how it
So
works.
humanity was technological for a long time before we were
Yeah.
scientific. So it's certainly possible to develop technology without being scientific. And we tend to think about, oh, look, we have developed science. Now we have science, so we can use science to understand the universe. Science itself is something that's evolving. It's changing. The way we do science today is very different from the way Galileo did it. Look at the studies you pointed out earlier. They have
Mhm.
simulations about the early solar system. So now we have this like new element of science, computational simulations, incredibly powerful tools for doing science. Galileo couldn't have imagined it. What future elements could we add to science? Have aliens added to science? So they would look at our science and be like, y'all are barely even doing science. I mean, that's the way we did
Yeah.
science a million years ago. So I think we tend to over accentuate the way that we're doing things now and imagine that we're at some final step, that we have the science badge and we're going to keep doing it this way forever. But it's just a moment in our history. We don't even have the word scientist until about the 1830s.
Right.
Right? Science is a fairly recent thing. And so it is hard to imagine. And, on your other point about like, what is it like to be an ape, or what is it like to be in the minds of these creatures? It's really sobering because we have these other intelligent creatures on Earth. And if you imagine we're going to be able to communicate with aliens, why haven't we been able to talk to whales and dolphins? Right? Like they evolved in the same climate as us, in the same biosphere. We have a lot of senses in common, and yet we can't crack that code. So to imagine we're gonna be able to crack an alien code is like, wow, that's ballsy. There's lots of human codes we've never cracked. There's so many like written languages from ancient cultures. Nobody knows what they say, what they mean. And these are like biologically identical humans to us, living on the same planet and with a similar culture. In many cases, we know about their culture. We have all sorts of cultural context, and we still can't crack the code. So aliens are very likely to be much more alien than we expect.
So this is actually a pretty good argument for the use of AI or machine learning. Is that I keep seeing these research articles coming out related to using AI to decode dog barks
Mm-hmm.
or whale song or
Mm-hmm.
trying to be able to speak languages, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so on one hand, I could say, like, okay, so this is actually a pretty good reason to keep cooking on that. Because if we ever do end up speaking with intelligent life from another planet, maybe the AI will help us kind of like decode what's happening. But then again, that is making a lot of assumptions about how communication works, that it would
Yeah.
follow similar rules of syntax or context that we use and animals on Earth use. And so, there's still a lot of leaps that there would be similarities
Mm-hmm.
that we would be able to draw upon. And so
Yeah.
I think what you're bringing up is such an important question of, just like we can say, like, I know that what I see and I call red is not necessarily what you see and you call red, that this is all
Mhm.
about perspectives, and that what
Yeah.
we consider curiosity or communication or scientific method or, any of these things might be completely, forgive
Mm-hmm.
the word, but like alien
Mm-hmm.
to another life form that has
Mhm.
none of the context that we have grown up around.
Yeah, that's exactly right. On your point of using AI to translate alien languages, I'm all for it. But the challenge that AI will face is the same challenge that we face, which is how do you know when you get it right? Like if you intercept
What a good point.
Right? If you intercept some human code, right? Your teenager is writing in their diary in some code, they don't want you to read it. You know when you've cracked it because it goes from gobbledygook to, oh, it's talking about where they went on Thursday, blah, blah, blah. But alien language, like, you could try to decode it, but like, how do you know when you got it right? It could be so alien, you're looking at it and you don't even recognize it. And I think more deeply than that, there's this question of like how aliens experience the universe. Like, we know that our senses are limited, that we only interact with a tiny slice of what's out there in the universe. And we tend to think of our senses like giving us a direct revelation of reality. Like the room I'm in, I know that my computer is here and whatever, but there's a lot more in this room. There's dark matter, there's neutrinos that I'm not sensing. So our sense of the universe internally is limited and defined by our perceptions. We talked earlier about like space telescopes. These are like technological extensions of our senses, but crucially, they don't change like our mental model of the universe. You notice when you look at an image from JWST, you don't see it in the original infrared. It'd be invisible to you. When you talk about gravitational waves, they don't show it to you in terms of like the waves. They play it for you like a sound. We're always translating things back into our own sensorium because that's the way we make sense of the universe. And so if aliens have a very different sensorium, or like octopus, right? They have like distributed brains. What's it like to be an octopus? We have no idea. What's it like to be an alien? That's going to really shape the questions they ask about the universe. And I think more crucially, how they accept the answers, because you always want answers in your own familiar, intuitive language. And that's going to be different for aliens as it is for us. And so we could end up in a situation where like they have answers that don't really make sense to us. And our physics, they're like, what are you even talking about? You know, even if we get past the communication questions.
So in the early part of the book, you reference the Drake equation, and which is the equation that kind of says if there is intelligent life in the universe, that could be spacefaring that we could meet, like, could it be there? What's the probability, right? So it's a probabilistic calculation of that. And you add a few factors to it for your book. Can you talk about like those factors and why you added them?
Yes.
And what do you think it's useful? Do you think that is actually, should we like officially change the Drake equation?
Well, I mean, Drake's equation tries to calculate how many intelligent civilizations there are out there that could send us a message. But I was interested in more than that. I don't just want there to be an intelligent civilization that sends us a message. I want to make mental contact and talk about the secrets of the universe. And so there's a sort of a subset of Drake's aliens that I'm interested in, the ones that do physics the way we do, so we can get like answers to our physics questions. And so I added a few terms. I added terms like, one, what are the fraction of those civilizations that are technological that do science? We don't know that it's 100%, as we just talked about. Another term is communication. Even if they can send us messages, can we make mental contact? Can we decode those messages? Because every communication has a translation step where you go from idea to symbol. And that translation, the assignment of ideas to symbols, is cultural and arbitrary. And so inverting it might be impossible. And then there's the question of, are they interested in the same questions as we are? Do they see the same emergent structures in the universe? Do they ask about those same things? And then finally, do they have the same kind of answers as we do? Like, are they interested in the same things? Would they accept our answers? Could they be working on a completely orthogonal theory of physics that also works? And what does that even mean about the nature of truth?
Like AI? Didn't it come up with like a completely different way of explaining things?
Exactly. Or, you know, could they come up with a theory of physics that we just don't even understand? Like, are we biologically limited from understanding alien, super advanced alien physics? So those are the things I put together to extend the Drake equation to ask the question, what fraction or how many aliens are there out there that we could have this physics conversation that I think Carl Sagan imagined and that young Daniel imagined when he was getting into physics? Is that really possible? Because that's what I wanted to figure out.
So your math, you think it's possible in an infinite universe with an infinite?
I think two things. I think it's very unlikely because a lot of things have to fall into place. Like the beauty of the Drake equation, I mean, it's not complicated like the Schrodinger equation. It's just a bunch of numbers multiplied together. But the beauty of it is that that structure reinforces how you have to have everything fall into place. Like, it doesn't matter if you got lots and lots of planets if none of them have life on it. And it doesn't matter if a lot of them have life on it, if it's all just green slime. You have to have everything fall into place to have intelligent aliens communicate with you. In the same way, you need a lot of philosophical assumptions to go the right way for there to be aliens out there we can talk to who are interested in the same stuff, whose answers we can digest, who can help us understand the universe. It's very unlikely. On the other hand, there are probably lots of them, and you only need one, right? I would accept just one civilization of advanced aliens that could help us understand the universe. That's all it takes, because, I hope there's just one answer, and I'm happy to accept any of it.
So one of the things you said that I thought was really interesting was talking about the way that they would communicate with us, and that the way that we communicate would make sense to each other, and we'd be able to kind of create almost like a narrative amongst each other in the way that we talk. Because one of the first things I thought of is the Voyager Golden Record, which I have a copy of here.
Oh, how cool.
Aside from the images, I've listened to the actual albums.
Wow.
And the thing that always struck me about it is that it feels extremely random. There's no message. It's just like, here's some whale songs, and here's some people singing, and here's some babies crying, and here's a symphony, and there's no narrative, right? It's just a bunch of stuff that we put on a record that's like, here's some things that make humans, which really was like, here's some things that usually make like Western white humans, but here's some human stuff, right? And here's some Earth stuff. And so I think that's the other thing is like, do we need to be more strategic in what we send out into space so that it is a narrative, so it indicates that we want to communicate, that there's a way that we talk, so that if they have an AI that can be trained on what we send out into the universe, that they're not sending us back babies crying and whale songs, right? Like, I think that it has to go both ways.
They're sending back a virus that can infect all of our technical systems, and then we are at their mercy. No.
Wow.
Back in the dark ages, for
Interstellar paranoia there. Nice. Well, I think that's a great example.
It's because the robots come first, and it's world robot domination. So
right.
I think that's a great example, because imagine if you got a message from space and you were playing around with it and trying to translate it, and you turned it into sound, and then it sounded like alien babies crying. Would you think, oh yeah, I've got it right? You'd be like, no, this is just garbage. Like, it's hard to even know. And what do they intend, right? What does this even mean? And, a question about being more intentional and building a narrative before the Voyager probe was the Pioneer plaque. Right. This is what got sent out on the Pioneer probes, and this is what Carl Sagan and Frank Drake put together. And it's much simpler, right, than the Voyager record, which has audio encoding, and like, oh my gosh, I don't know that I could build something to decode that right now.
Yeah.
This is just pictograms, and they tried to be strategic about it, and they tried to avoid obvious cultural influences and to be universal. And they drew diagrams to represent like the hydrogen atom and these kinds of things, because they were hoping to find some kind of symbols that they thought were going to be universal, that only had one interpretation. But that's impossible, right? It's the assignment between ideas and symbols is always arbitrary. And so inverting it, you have to know the culture in order to decode these symbols, right? And so, for example, I took these symbols and I showed them to a bunch of physics grad students, and I gave them the afternoon and a bunch of donuts, and I said, what do you think?
Figure out what do they mean.
Exactly. And they're young enough to have never seen this before. And this is like the perfect audience, because they're biologically human.
Is this because like they're younger than cassette tapes?
Exactly. They're like the Pioneer. What? Yeah. And this is like much easier than the task aliens will face, because again, these are biological humans. They grew up in the same culture as Carl Sagan. They're physics grad students, right? Who has more in common with Carl Sagan than these folks? And they couldn't make any progress. They had no idea what these things meant, right? Because they represent like not just like one depiction of the hydrogen atom, but like depiction of the hydrogen atom as like orbitals, the way like Niels Bohr drew it. The human concept of an atom from like about a 10-year period, about 100 years ago, right? Nobody depicts an hydrogen atom that way now, and didn't before. And so, it's very reflective of our culture. So as much as I love looking for aliens and the SETI project, I'm not optimistic that they're ever going to get a signal that they can decode, which is why
Right.
in the book I focus on the much, much easier scenario of the aliens get here. They arrive. And I saw someone
They
in the
already know
comments say,
about us. Everything's all good, and they're coming. They're here.
exactly that. Somebody in the comments said aliens will never come here, and I hope you're wrong. But in that scenario, we have a lot
They're already
easier
here.
problem to solve, which is like we have some cultural context in common because they're here. We literally are in the same place. We can like point to stuff and say apple or donut or doggy or whatever, and hope to build from there some sort of dictionary we can use to establish communication. But I think if it's just messages across space without any cultural context, that's going to be really hard, maybe impossible.
I mean, even one of the images is of the Arecibo Radio Observatory,
Mhm.
which is kind of
No
broken.
longer exists.
It's
Yeah,
not there anymore.
that's true. That's sad. That's sad.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was so that was one of that one hit home. That one really hurt.
Yeah.
Uh, that is I think that is the part of science that as scientists, I think is sometimes forgotten, which is the cultural context.
Mhm.
And there is no separating science from the cultural context, even though, as I said earlier, we scientists try to unbias and make it as far from human interpretation as possible, but you can't do that. And then it's in the world, and then it's of the time. And so, how do you like? Aside from being able to understand and use a signal from an alien
Yeah.
species with an alien culture in its own space and time, how would we ever design against that? I think.
Mhm.
How do
Well,
you make it timeless?
yeah, it's impossible to know, and we can't fully unwrap our human biases until we meet the aliens. But one thing we can do is try to make sure we're using as many different human cultures as possible. This is one reason why like cultural diversity in science is important because people come in with different assumptions and different questions and different curiosities, and they help you realize, oh boy, I was asking this question this way. This is another interesting question. And even more than like our current diversity in science, we had this amazing sort of natural experiment here on Earth where we had the development independently of mathematics and astronomy and sort of proto science in the Americas with the Mayans and in the Far East with the Chinese and in the Middle East with the Greeks and the Sumerians, the Babylonians,
Mhm.
and we can compare and
Persian.
contrast those in the historical record to see like, wow, which directions are inevitable, which directions are random and cultural. Unfortunately or fortunately, those cultures are no longer distinct and separate. So the experiment is sort of ended prematurely. It'd be fascinating, like to figure out now, like what would the Mayans be studying if they were still doing science today, and the Spaniards hadn't, burned all of their their books. I love thinking about that. I read a fantastic science fiction novel about that by Tad Williams once.
Oh,
Anyway,
nice.
for the book I did dig into those records and look at like how did the Mayans approach this versus the Chinese, and the story is similar across the continents that everybody saw patterns in the sky and then
Mhm.
tried to understand them and used math to understand them. The kinds of math they used are different, though. Like the Chinese were very algebraic. They look at like patterns in tables of numbers. And the Greeks, of course, very geometrical. They think of answers as like, where are things in space, shapes and circles. And the Mayans sort of in between. Like they had very advanced mathematics. They had more accurate predictions for where the planets were than the Europeans when the Spaniards arrived.
So I'm
But we don't
wondering,
have a lot of their records.
someone earlier, Paul Disney said, made a reference to base 10 math,
Hmm.
right? Where there has been math that's base 12, base
Yeah.
60. There are multiple, and I think it was Mayans who were base 60.
Hmm.
And so the the difference in the way the numbers calculate, it's not the math is still there, and the way it works, I guess, still works. Like,
Yeah.
did you look at that deep enough to, like,
Mhm.
be like, "Oh, there's some real differences here," or you're like, "Oh, yeah, it's all kinda similar, just different bases?"
Yeah, well, it is quite different. The Chinese, again, they're algebraic. And so if you read the early Chinese writing about their theories about the cosmos, it doesn't quite make sense to you if you're a geometric thinker, because you're reading it and you're like, so what is where exactly and where do I put stuff? And that's just not how they were thinking about it. They weren't thinking geometrically. Most of us have grown up in the West, and the way of thinking is geometric because of the Greeks and the Babylonians. And so we're so geometrical as thinkers that
I
some of that early
I
writing
don't
from the
think I
Chinese.
was until Pythagoras, like
Yeah,
that theorem.
exactly. And it wasn't until Descartes that we understood that, like, oh, geometry and algebra are actually the same thing. They're just different ways to tackle the same fundamental concepts. Like how two equations on a page, you can solve them algebraically for the solution, or you can graph them and see where they intersect. It's exactly the same fundamental mathematics, just two different sets of structures that turn out to be equivalent to each other, which is super fascinating. But you ask a really deep question about mathematics, and I saw somebody in the comments say, like, well, certainly math will have in common with the aliens, even if not physics. And that seems compelling, and it seems likely, but it also, how do we know? Right? We do science with math, and we find math everywhere we do science. And in fact, math sometimes leads us to answers. Like, there's cases in the history of science where people have just used mathematics to say, well, this would be prettier mathematically if we had this other term. And then it turns out, oh, yeah, we have that term. It exists in the universe. So math seems to lead us to answers, but we don't know if it's actually necessary or just very, very useful. And I read this mind-blowing book. It's called Science Without Numbers, by a philosopher who said, look, this idea of like having a number line and putting things on a number line, that's just an abstract concept that works in your head, but you don't need it. You don't need those numbers to do science. And he developed a theory of gravity without any numbers. And it's not a very nice theory. It's not a very useful theory, but it does work. And so it sort of proves the point that, like, math could just be an insight into the way our brains work. So something that's convenient for us, an easy shorthand for us because of the way our minds work. It doesn't have to be that way for aliens. Or it could be that we have in common, and that would be an incredible discovery. But we can't take that for granted.
But it's wild to think about a spaceship that would run without math. But I can see how it's possible, right?
Yeah.
But
I think, steampunk spaceship.
We got to fermentation. We got to, like, last week.
Exactly. You can have a biochemical combustion system that's just like, you feed this goo the right amount and the engine goes. Like, there's it's possible, right?
It's possible. Yeah. And I had a really fun conversation. I emailed Noam Chomsky, because I was thinking, who else has thought about linguistics and aliens? So I emailed him, and he's famous for
also math, right?
Math. So, he's famous for actually reading his email and answering it. And so he agreed to have a conversation with me, and I asked him this question, and he said math. He said the way to make contact with aliens is through math, because arithmetic is the foundation of all of human math, and everything builds from there, and 1 + 1 = 2 everywhere. And I saw Paul Disney there in the comments commenting about whole number integers. And that's a compelling argument, because it seems likely that 1 + 1 = 2 everywhere. But you could also imagine aliens that don't have whole number integers. Like, what if, you're aliens that are existing as tendrils of plasma in the atmosphere of a star, and the edge of your body is not you can't really define it. So you never come up with this I'm different from you. I count myself as 1 and you as 2.
Slime mold math.
Yeah. So maybe they only start from real numbers, and integers are why would you even, to them, it's why would you draw this weird dotted line between your body and the rest of the universe? That doesn't make sense. That's totally arbitrary. And when you think about it, it kind of is where is the edge of my body? Is it, do my hairs count? Is it my personal space? In the end, I am drawing an arbitrary.
What about when I pick up a pen or get in a car and I'm driving the car? Is my body now the entire car?
Exactly, right. Or you lose an arm, is it still part of your body even though it's deteriorated? These turn out to be, these seem like obvious questions, but they're very fuzzy philosophically. And that tells you, okay, there's some assumptions here. And those assumptions may strike you as obvious, But there's so many times in the history of physics and science when things that have seemed obvious about the universe have turned out to be not at all true. And the whole point of science is to not just accept our intuition, but like let the data tell us. And we just don't have data about these things. We just don't know. And it could be that when the aliens come, that's when we figure out, wow, were we wrong about stuff we assumed was true?
I think your next book title is Not at All True.
That's the one I'll write after the aliens come and tell us what's up, man.
Exactly. So you're getting at something that I actually was thinking about as I was reading through your book, and the, the book is like it says, do aliens speak physics? And you think you're going to get into a pop culture, popular physics book. But then it's like all about animals and philosophy and like all these different ideas that are not physics when it comes, like it's much broader. Did you plan on making a gateway book to astrophysics?
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask this question: is physics discovered or invented? And to get there, you have to know a lot about biology to understand perception, to understand how we ask questions, and philosophy to know what is the underpinnings of mathematics and why science works at all. So for me, these projects are fun because they give me an excuse to dig into something I always wanted to know more about, but haven't had an afternoon to do it. And now I'm like, oh, it's part of this project, so I'm going to go read 3 books on philosophy of numbers, and so it's super fun for me. And I originally pitched this idea for a book to my 14-year-old. It was like, what if I wrote a book about whether physics is human or universal? And he was like, yawn, that sounds really boring. And that hurt my feelings a little bit, but you got to listen to the teenagers. And so then I came back, I was like, okay, what about a book where aliens arrive and it's about whether we can talk science to them? And he was like, oh yeah, I would totally read that book. And I was telling
No,
myself,
seriously, I read this and I want to give it to my 14-year-old now. Like I do. I'm like, I was reading. I'm like, Kai needs to read this book. He's going to love it.
Because there's so many fun ideas in philosophy. And in my opinion, not enough books that explore the edge of popular physics and popular philosophy. Because, hey, the reason popular physics is cool is because of philosophy. Like, why do we care where the universe came from? Because there are deep philosophical implications about what it means to be human and alive in the world. The same way
every physicist, like theoretical physicist, goes from writing books about theoretical physics to writing books about philosophy.
I know.
Everybody takes the Sean Carroll track.
Well,
like, I got tenure. I'm writing philosophy now.
Well, very flattering. Any comparison to Sean Carroll is very flattering because he did it right. He actually went and learned the stuff and noticed what he's talking about. There are other physicists I won't mention.
He's a kind person.
He is a kind and modest and humble guy. There are other physicists who make the much more common mistake of assuming that because they know physics, therefore they're experts in everything and they can opine about everything without having done the reading. And so I really didn't want to make that mistake. But I was very lucky. There are a bunch of really smart philosophers here at UC Irvine who read this and made sure that I wasn't making a fool of myself and I was correctly summarizing some of these discussions. But there's a lot of really interesting stuff in philosophy that I think more people should know about, and it's really relevant and fun to think about, not just like dry and dusty.
And I think that is also at this critical time in the United States for science, where we have this question of, okay, people know science is important. People know that it impacts their lives. They have money for science. That's great. But okay, whatever. Why do I care? That is the crux, right? Why do I care?
Yeah.
And how do you humanize science? Because the glass tower, the bubble has been isolationist for way too long. And it's making approachable books like this that break down those thought patterns and assumptions and make you start thinking. So,
oh, thank you. I agree. And the more people we can bring into science to show them the joy of curiosity and wondering about the universe, and that's why I love y'all's show.
Okay, so donuts. Why the donuts? Donuts in the book.
One of my role models as a writer is Dave Barry, and he has this column
Oh my
about
gosh.
how
Was that a San Francisco Chronicle or no?
no, the
No.
Miami
Miami
something,
Herald.
yeah,
Yeah.
Miami Herald. He had
Yes.
this article which I will always remember. It's where he says some words are funny. Like the word weasel is funny, booger is funny,
Poop.
and so you just try to like pick something whimsical and add it to each chapter as like something to hang on to, because the idea of this book is like there's big ideas in there, but I don't want to weigh you down. I want to break it up with a bunch of dad jokes and cartoons from my friend Andy Warner, so that you get a big idea and then something to laugh at, to make it sort of easy to read.
Throughout, there are really wonderful cartoons and lots of pop culture-y type stuff, and it's very fun. And at the beginning of each chapter, you have these sci-fi short stories, these hypothetical situations that they are actually little fun science fiction short stories.
Mm-hmm. The idea there was, we're writing a chapter about a concept. Do we have to use math? Do aliens have to use math also? And then I wanted to illustrate that and like, what would it be like to meet aliens that don't? Why would that be hard? What would be surprising about it? So we try to make a concrete scenario to illustrate each concept.
Yeah.
If we met aliens that had very different sensoriums or asked very different questions or whose answers we couldn't understand, what would that be like? What would we do in that scenario? How would we figure it out? I'm also a huge fan of science fiction, and so I couldn't resist the urge to write little fictional scenarios.
Have you done sci-fi short story or novel writing before?
No. So this is a first for me. But
is it your next project? Are you writing a sci-fi book next, or
it's about you guys have already spoiled it because it's about invading robot alien squirrels. So thanks for ruining it.
Got it.
You heard
well,
it
if
here
I can
first,
also
everyone.
suggest, you should probably pitch to the Futurama writers room, because I know that they take a lot of scientists in there, and several things you brought up today. I was like, man, this sounds like an episode of Futurama. The plasma alien that doesn't know where they end and another alien begins. Futurama, right?
Futurama.
So like,
all right.
This is your next stop, Daniel.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. That's always been the end of my career, would be writing for Futurama.
Yes. Absolutely.
Some people were excited about Big Bang Theory when that was going on, but Futurama,
yeah.
It's kind of where it's at for science TV these days, except for Eleanor.
Thank you. I think we have very different audiences, but thank you. I appreciate being mentioned in the same breath as Futurama.
Well, first one, then many years.
How to wrap things together. Yeah. Okay, so I don't want to keep you forever and late into the night, and I know Blair probably is going to be needing to get on to her child as well this evening. Are you working on anything else right now? I mean, right now it's like, everybody, the book's available. Where can they find it? Where can they find you?
So the book comes out November 4th, so very, very soon. And you can look it up online everywhere, and it's at alienspeakphysics.com. If you pre-order the book, you can get free stickers of some of the aliens from Andy. Look for the link on my website, www.alienspeakphysics.com. And I have a podcast, Daniel and Kelly's Extraordinary Universe, where we talk about biology and physics and everything in between, and have a lot of fun. And then in my day job, I'm doing particle physics, which keeps me quite busy, but I really love it. Research and teaching.
And you are going to use all the machine learning to search through that data and find something new at the Atlas.
That's the plan. Exactly. Discover something new, blow your minds, collect the Nobel Prize. That's the goal, but we haven't got there yet.
And if you don't, in the meantime, you're writing great books for people to enjoy.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much. It's such a it's been what I said this earlier when we were before the show. I think it's about 250 or 60 episodes since we talked with you previously.
Amazing. Congrats all. Wow. Well, thank you very much for having me back on, and for reading my book, and for considering buying it. And thanks to your audience.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for chatting about science with us. Really appreciate it.
Good night.
Have a good night. Thank you. All right, everybody. We are going to have a couple more stories. I have some brain news. Daniel, you don't have to leave if you don't want to. You can stay for brains. But we had, it was a nice, easy out. It was good.
My daughter
And
is
we do
texting me,
have
so
to find out about Blair's panda poop. So
Yes, that's still coming.
I should probably go. My daughter is texting me something, but it's been wonderful. Thank you very
I know
much.
how it goes.
All
Thank
right.
you very
Good night.
much. I hope that we
Good
get to speak
night.
again soon. Take care.